Hello everyone, and welcome to the Mancini the Amazing channel, and I have an incredible story to tell you about how I played Pokemon wrong, and it worked in VGC Draft League. So, for some brief context, if this is, because these videos tend to be some of the most successful on the channel, if you're new to this, so I'm a VGC focused content creator, though I do occasionally do singles content, featuring both Draft League and ladder content. And I have recently completed a season of a VGC Pokemon Draft League where I played Pokemon wrong. It's called the VBL, the VGC Battle League, and it was season 10, so quite an esteemed season. And I had a very fun season, and I'd like to tell you how some decisions that I made before the season and then followed throughout the season wound up making me have a really enjoyable season, made a lot of really interesting decisions, got to do a lot of different fun things, and how I got to explore and what my takeaways were from this season. So for those of you who saw my semi-finals game, playing against the undefeated coach Dameron, and ending that there, you will have heard that I went with an item sort of clause for my builder. So not only every week do all Pokemon have to run different items as they do for a standard VGC format, but also every Pokemon I had was only allowed to use the items that they used once. And I thought it was interesting, after having done that and had that impact, to go back and look at how often the decisions I made with the item usage, how often that was a good decision or an impactful decision, how often that even had the chance to turn into something throughout the game. So let's see. I am obviously doing this after. So the start of the season, I went 0-2 with a team pre-transactions. Then I made some transactions. I lost the first game after that. But then I had 4 games in a row, going from an 0-3 to make playoffs, before ultimately not making it through after playoffs. But here is sort of how it was going. And Salazzle came to every single week. So it was the Pokemon that sort of had to deal with a lot of the different items. And I did make, at the start of the season, a video about Pokemon items, but that is, and that's definitely like worth going and checking out. So we used a whole bunch of different items there, and I even used some more items here. But I think I wound up using the most unique items of any coach in the season so far, at least. And that's even despite there being another coach who I'd approached before the season saying that I was going to do this. And then they said, oh, actually, I'm also doing something similar. But they were only stopping using items if their items had mattered, whereas I went the other way around. So I wanted to take the chance to look at how I did it by Pokemon rather than overall. And I wanted to, be able to, face consequences if I bring a really good item on a Pokemon that just doesn't show up, or if I bring an item that, it just doesn't get the opportunity to show. And there's no Citrus Berry, because Citrus was one of my most used items, and I wound up losing on a few different Pokemon throughout the season. But yes, good on Salazzle, and then Iron Yolk was definitely a solid mod as well. So I'm going to take week by week and look at games 1, 2, and 3 if they did make it to game 3, and see whether I thought those, whether those items even had the opportunity to matter. So our first game, so how important are items? I thought it was interesting, to look at sort of how frequently different items on Pokemon, being a best of 3, you bring 4 of 6 Pokemon. Sometimes a Pokemon may only come to 1 of 3 games, and sometimes it may come to 0 of 3 games, and that can influence how impactful it is. An item like a Life Orb, most of the time, it is going to activate. If you're able to get an attack off, it is going to activate. But how impactful that can be is a separate question, and also you start taking damage yourself there. The Focus Sash is an incredibly swingy item, so if you are at 100%, if you take damage that would put you straight to 0 from a single attack, then you stay on at 1 HP, which is generally less than 1%, but functionally 1%. That is like another big sort of swing item, but if anything has happened, so if you don't ever get hit with an attack, obviously it doesn't matter. If the Pokemon ever hits the field, it doesn't matter, and certainly if the Pokemon gets hit with another attack where it's brought below that 100% range, then it never has the opportunity to matter. And then the Eye of Papa Berry here only activates when a Pokemon goes at 25% or below health. You regain 33%, which is a decent amount of health swing back, but that, 75% of like damage points that you get put to, it never activates. And even then, whether you live something from 58 is a separate question, or even 34 if you were on 1% at the time. So I thought it'd be really interesting to sort of explore that. I did use all 3 of these items, as well as a whole range of other items as well. And yeah, so week 1 was the run back. So my last game of last season was a playoffs game against Richweave and the Anchorage Alakazams. And my first week of this season was a game, week 1, against Richweave and the Anchorage Alakazams. So, and this was not like the most promising sort of look. So it did go to game 3, so we had the opportunity for all 3 games for items to matter. I believe I did use all 6 of my Pokemon, and yet Bruxish Clear Amulet never activated. I was never hit with a move that had the secondary chance to drop my stats. I think I might have been hit with one once, but I died. In which case it wouldn't have been able to drop my stats because I would have fainted. But I'm not even sure if that is true. Dragapult, 2 of the times, it hit a Flamethrower once into a Qianpao and once into a Fungus. And I believe that the Qianpao one didn't actually, like the Expert Belt didn't matter, but it had the opportunity to. Went to a Focus Sash. It might have mattered, depending, but I think it didn't, depending on their investment. But yeah, so that is like, the Fungus one, it did have some impact. But that's even if it theoretically could have impacted. And then this Papa Berry activated in game 2, it didn't activate in game 1, and I don't think I brought them on in game 3. In game 1 it just got O-code. So yes, even when you are trying to EV to barely live something, if there is some disruption that makes it so you take slightly more damage, and then instead of winding up at 35, you wind up at 0. At 35, as in you live at 2 and then get the berry. If you wind up at 0, that's not going to do much for you there. But yes, Covert Cloak never got hit by a move with a secondary effect. Clear Amulet never got intimidated, never had anything to drop my stats in any way. And then Jetpack, I never activated that Jetpack successfully. Fistplate, only in game 3 that I actually managed to successfully click a fighting type move. So yeah, it really was not a great start. I had some items which were definitely, can be impactful. Bruxish is a Pokemon that doesn't love getting intimidated, even more so on physical sets than this special one. I don't actually know why I ran Clear Amulet on special. But that certainly can be really impactful. Gastrodon, there's a lot of times where Gastrodon, I know later in the season I played against Knucklestack, and I would have loved to have had that on Gastrodon then. I'm not sure it wound up being the field against the Gastrodon at any point, but it's always still a nice defensive item. And then the Eject-Back on Salazzle is something that it can take advantage of specifically. Don't know why it was Corrosion. I think normally you do that with Oblivious, because then you can't be intimidated and forced out. But yeah, definitely not the biggest thing. At least I had items matter in all 3 of my games, which is better than some. Week 2 against Rhino Gigs, Oceanasi O'Malley, Okana Ohonahe, in a video that came out yesterday and in a video that came out tomorrow. It comes out tomorrow, I believe, on my channel. Absolute legend. But yes, so many items. That actually, I did have a decent amount, right? So this triple arrows, thing, I did hit a triple arrows into a Pokemon it was super effective into, so Expert Belt did pop off. Both games I used the Phantom Force with the Power Herb, which also by losing it I got Acrobatics off, which was nice. Though the damage just was really, really sad for both of them, it just didn't do anything. The Assault Vest, I got hit by a special move, and then hit immediately by another move that KO'd, and it wasn't impactful, but I lived an Eruption at 7 and then died to the next move, even though it would have just hit nothing if I hadn't died. So it wasn't impactful overall, but it did actually activate. The Utility Umbrella, they did not bring rain. The Pashu Berry, I did not get hit by a water type move. And yeah, the Rindo Berry, game 1 I did get hit by a grass move, and I think I might have died anyway. But at least I got to actually activate it. Definitely a bit sort of tragic when your stuff just does not wind up popping off, or when you commit to something like a Power Hub, which is very swingy. This is the only one I brought this season, and then it isn't that strong either way. The difference between Phantom Force and Shadow Force definitely being felt there. So now we head into week 3. So this is my first game after transactions, my favorite transactions. And this one, Iron Jugular's came every game, and it had the booster energy, and then because it hit the field, the booster energy activated. So there we go. We found an item that activates in every game. I think this may be the only item that activated in every game of a set of 3. Bruxish, I believe, did not come game 3. I believe it only came game 1 or 2, and it was able to successfully click physical moves, even if they may have, or may not have KO'd with choice band, without choice band. I think that it did need the choice band for the KOs. I know it got one with crunch. I think that one was impactful. Then we have the Spec Salazzle, who actually game 2 was on the field with choice specs, but it did not manage to successfully click a move because it fainted before it managed to get the KO, which was quite unfortunate. And then Cleavor, all 3 games it was in, but the 3rd game it missed the Stone Axe, so Stone Plate didn't get to pop off, which was pretty unfortunate. And then Gastro, I think, did come, but like died. I think it hit a Pokemon with a move that was neutral once, and it did not get a super effective move off successfully. It may not have come, though. I only just rewatched all of these games in a row, so I don't have them all memorized. But yeah, against Tay, definitely a bit of a struggle. But yes, the Booster Energy and Iron Jugulis, I think this wound up being a very good use of it, even if I didn't wind up winning the series. And clearly I should have been White Lens, even though the Stone Plate was actually pretty impactful for damage in Game 1. But yeah, just is how it is sometimes. It was alright. Gold Mimi. Life Orb. I mean, I wound up losing, but the Life Orb was helpful. Week number 4 was where I just kind of, at the insistence of Jordan, gave up on doing a lot of these more sneaky, more long game sort of trying to do things, like trying to set up sword stances and the like. Even if I had like definitely some main offense, Wisp, sword stance and stuff, I'm not super fast. And then I went with a more fast game plan here, and it was a 2-0 win, which is good. Game 1, I managed to clean up, and it did matter. I managed to clean up a Xanthos with a Mirror Herb boost on Tauros. The Salazzle on Focus Sash did nothing. It got hit by multiple moves. I think it survived one of the games, but it had been hit by a move, so its Sash was broken without it actually being activated both games. Iron Jugulis was never taunted. This UI hit a move and it didn't crit, so I wasn't sure whether to count that. It only hit one move. I wasn't sure whether to count that as Scope Lens activating or not, because it had a chance to activate, it just didn't. And it's hard to tell with something like Clear Amulet, where one of the games later, I was hit by a move that had a secondary, like a low chance secondary effect of potentially dropping a stat, which didn't happen, but I don't know if that's just because it didn't roll or because of the Clear Amulet. And the Clear Amulet does help you be safe against stuff like that. And then, yeah, the Gastrodon Citrus Berry didn't go off, but I think that's just because I didn't bring the Gastrodon. I think I brought these 5. With, I think, Tauros not coming game 2. I think Mimikyu came instead. Though possibly Mimikyu came over Decidueye. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I know Decidueye hit a move in game 2. I think it was these 4 game 2, and possibly these 4, or possibly the top 4 in game 1. But yeah, strong stuff. Focus Ash, it can be impactful, though the main thing that was impactful was the Terraground Terra Blast, Terraground Earth Power sort of stuff. Just clicking damaging moves does a lot of damage. And yeah, Clear Amulet is a really strong offensive item if you're playing against Intimidate, which I was playing against, I believe, double Intimidate in that game against Purple Rain. Yeah, so that was cool. Week 5. Now, coming in against... Who was it? Oh, this was against Tuxmuts, who wound up having an 0-7 season of a bunch of relatively close games. So this was a 2-0 series, and it had, yes, the safety goggles activated in game 1. I checked in game 2, they did not have any chance to. Iron Treads did not, I think, come game 2, so it didn't get the Life Orb move off. This Cleavor with the Clear Amulet, so this Room Service, there was no Trick, the Trick Room was never set, so the Room Service did nothing. This Cover Cloak, I was never hit by a move with a secondary effect, so the Cover Cloak did nothing. And the Iron Jugulis never clicked a move, it never hit the field, so the Choice Specs did nothing. And then this, yeah, Cleavor with Clear Amulet, it got hit by a Psychic from Oranguru, followed by an Earth Power from Torkoal, and if the Psychic had Special Defense dropped me, it would have fainted. So the Clear Amulet, I think, I mean, regardless of whether it could have fainted or not, right? Even if the first one had been Psyshock and the second one had been Earth Power, and I could have been stat dropped, I think that it would belong on this list as something which theoretically could have activated, because it's a pretty low standard. But even like with this low standard, how many times are items not activating, right? Like Mimikyu game 2 just wasn't in a position, like it wasn't hit with Sleep Powder, so safety goggles didn't matter. Yeah, definitely is really sort of like it could have impacted their decision not to bring Lilligant in the next game, or they might have brought Lilligant and it just didn't hit it. But like there's a lot of like ifs and buts. Week 6, Strike and Strike Harder. I hit so many items that didn't do anything. No, that's true. This is the other one. This Assault Vest did not matter. Only got hit by physical move. This Wigglytuff never hit the field. This Sorka, they didn't bring Gothitelle, so Shed Shell did not matter. I never clicked a fire move. I brought Salazzle several times. I clicked Fake Out and Sludge Bomb. Never either of the fire moves. This Insect Plate, I only clicked a bug move in game 3. But I clicked it a bunch, and it was very impactful. I think I also Terra bugged that game, but I might have Terra ghosted. And then yes, this Choice Band, I kept clicking moves with this Mimikyu, and it was super, super consistent. And Choice Band on a good Pokemon, especially with priority, is very consistent, but like one with decent speed as well, certainly doesn't hurt. But yeah, like most of these other items did nothing. The Assault Vests have not been particularly compelling for me this season. But yes, against Heaven, yeah. And it really helped having these sorts of modifiers because my opponent brought like attack dropping, and having the multiplicative modifier meant that it sort of limits the impact that their stat drops do, which was alright. Though obviously a Clear Amulet could have been okay as well. But yeah, it's cool. It's definitely... Choice Band is a very good item. And some of these items you have control over, but some of them are very impacted by what your opponent does and which Pokemon you bring. Is like the main thing that determines whether an item can be used or not. And then week 7, so the big one. This was the one that came down to whether I could make playoffs or not. I was playing against the Jordan. They had like a super, super, super bulky team, which had a decent amount of offense as well, but I think was generally a bit slower than my team. So I had to like use Iron Triggerless defensively. It activated Citrus Berry in both games. I had an Air Balloon on Salazzle. It got popped in one of the games. The other game it did not get popped. I never was immune to a ground move because of it, so I don't think it counts. Iron Treads and Rotom never hit the field, so neither of their items activated. Bruxish only successfully clicked a move in game 2. I think Rotom was in the back game 1, and it just didn't hit. I just won with the first 3. But I'm not 100% on that. It might have been Bruxish in the back. But it never clicked a move successfully. And then game 2, it did click a move. Which, is what it is. I know the previous time with the Choice Band it got knocked off. So yeah, the Choice Band on Cleavor wound up being pretty impactful. On Bruxish, yeah, Choice Band, very good item. And then yeah, Salazzle, here we are. The many items of very, very high variance in terms of quality. And certainly in terms of game impact. So yeah, not too much. Like Booster Energy could have mattered if I brought Iron Treads, but Iron Treads is just a bad Pokemon, so I didn't bring it. Now we get to quarterfinals. So this game basically came entirely down to if my opponent played badly, because Colby had a very strong team, and I had quite a crap team. I think Thundurus is just frankly been underrated. It's very, very good with Stomping Tantrum. Yeah, so what if they played like really bad? Then how could I win? So I had flinch moves with the Expert Belt. I got, I think, a super effective Air Slash into a Moongus, and that was when the ability procced. It didn't. The Chople Berry wound up just being bad. If I had any offensive item on Tauros has not used a single item except for Mirror Herb this game. So if I had Life Orb, if I had the Fist Plate, if I had anything, Tauros would have put me in a much better position to win game 2. But I didn't. I had Chople Berry, and it wound up being quite bad. Originally, it was Focus Sash in prep, and then I wanted to put the Focus Sash on Bruxish, so I made a Chople Berry, because the Focus Sash was only proccing against, like, some Lando sets where they hadn't been intimidated, and, or Palafin sets, or, against Urshifu, and then the Chople Berry also made me live Urshifu. But yeah, it didn't wind up being particularly good. Offensive item would have been significantly better. And then, yeah, Bruxish is Focus Sash. Bruxish, I don't know, Focus Sash is just not a very consistent item in the current format. There's just so much spread moves that go on. But it is good on a mon like Bruxish because it can't be revenged by priority moves through Sash. Just getting the Sash procs initially, especially on a team which they're trying to keep up offense by clicking attacking moves a lot, is quite difficult. Game 2 and 3, I was faster than Pokemon because of Cleavor, because of the Scarf on Cleavor, which is good. Gastron came all 3 games, but Game 3, there was a Rage Powder, but I just Ice Beamed into, like, I was attacking the Amoonguss anyways, so it didn't impact it, but it may have impacted my opponent's decision making. But yeah, like, I mean, having 4 impactful items out of 6 isn't terrible, but still not very good. You know, so game 2 and 3, these items, like game 1, 2, and 3, nothing. Game 2 and 3, nothing. Game 3, nothing. But I think the safety goggles was probably definitely like decent, because it won me game 1 basically by itself, even if as these other 2 had items that no, actually the Citrus Berry was also really, really good. Yeah, so, you know, as the season went on, I was forced to using items that are maybe less optimal on the individual Pokemon. Like Expert Belt and Iron Jugulus is generally probably not as good as like a special attack boosting booster energy. So that's definitely a like sort of consideration I had to deal with. Definitely I found like a lot of items, especially when I was forced into not using items which are consistent, a lot of items become very inconsistent. So how often did the items that I used 3 or 4 times actually activate? So the 2 big ones here, the items I used 4 times, the Expert Belt and the Citrus Berry. So one of the times I did not get an Expert Belt move off, by which I mean the Pokemon did not click a super effective move at any point that like connected in with a target. In no point did it say super effective. And the other 3 times it did, so that was pretty good, solid. Even if maybe the numbers weren't always as impactful, at least they were connecting moves that were super effective. Citrus Berries, I had 2 games where Pokemon had Citrus Berries, and they just literally did not activate. The other 2 games they did, but the other 2 games, even the getting in that 50% range was a challenge. Like one of the times was on Salazzle, which is, I think, very funny. And then we have the other ones, so just 100% of the time, Life Orb and Choice Band activated. I clicked a move in that week that was boosted by one of those items, and that's great. I think both of those are very strong items, very consistent sort of items. A lot of priority moves tend to be physical, which I think is why Choice Band is easy to activate than Choice Specs, and often a bit more reliable. My Choice Specs, I had 3 of them. One of the times the Specs Pokemon did not hit the field. One of the times the Specs Pokemon did like come, but didn't successfully click a move because I'd already won. And the other time I ran Specs, it was pretty good. It was on the Salazzle. The Specs Salazzle wound up being pretty decent, but I also would have liked to have run more Specs Salazzles throughout the season. Clear Amulet, I don't know why I brought it week 1. I think I must have been physical and put it on it. And the other 2 times it did matter, or it may have mattered. I would maybe not have lost had the Oranguru Psychic Spadef dropped and the like Cleavor had died that turn. But it certainly would have been more like it certainly wouldn't have been guaranteed for me to win, which it was. So I think the defensive stuff in Clear Amulet is pretty good because there are a lot of moves, especially special moves, that have good like stat drop chances. And yeah, I mean, I think Clear Amulet is a super premium item. I think Choice Band and Choice Specs are premium on offensive teams and can be premium on defensive teams. Like there are a lot of sort of situations where you can get a lot of value out of these items. Life Orb, yeah, another premium item. Citrus Berry, definitely a premium item. Expert Belt was only here because I had a bunch of Pokemon that weren't allowed to use better items, like Life Orb. I think generally Expert Belts are better on defensive Pokemon because they will not want to take the recoil from Life Orb, and often the fact that they're on the field for longer means that they don't have as much, they don't prioritize the consistent damage as much because they can click more moves, so it's less important that their moves are as impactful. It's also why you can run Yawn on defensive pokes. Yeah, Citrus Berry really just kind of came down to the shape of the teams my opponent brought, but I thought it was interesting. And then which items never worked. So I brought both a Covert Cloak and a Focus Sash twice. The Focus Sashes, the Pokemon just had their Focus Sashes broken otherwise, or didn't take any damage that series. Not taking any damage that series is obviously decent, but like, it's kind of sad. The Focus Sash is just like, I think most of the time when my Pokemon were taking damage, they weren't taking the sort of damage that would get that would put them to Focus Sash. So that is definitely like a pretty general sort of thing. I think had I gotten into the next round of playoffs, that would have been funny because everyone would have been in the same division. I would have been playing Purple Rain again. I would have had like so few items drawn. Most of these items in this other section are specifically tech items against my opponent. The exception, I believe, being Air Balloon. So no, a Jetpack and Air Balloon were ones that I had control over. And then Scope Lens, which is RNG. No, Flame Plate. So these four. So Utility Umbrella is a tech against my opponent bringing Rain, which they did not. Pashu Berry was requiring my opponent to hit that Pokemon with a Water type move, which they did not. Tropical Berry is requiring my opponent to hit that Pokemon with a Fighting type move, which they did not. Shed Shell was requiring my opponent to bring Gothitelle and have the Gothitelle also be Shadow Tag, and then also like want to switch my Gastron in or out. So it was really dealing with one very specific matchup, so that's why it doesn't come here. Room Service needed my opponent to click Trick Room. My opponent, I never really let my opponent be in a position where they felt comfortable clicking Trick Room. Even if they did often have their Trick Room set out, they often felt compelled to click in like Instruct, Psychic, Encore, rather than setting up Trick Room. So the Room Service didn't wind up coming in. So again, that kind of comes down to how my team was constructed, disconnected from how I could get value out of this specific item, though it still would have been a nice if it did get into that like particularly challenging situation. Scope Lens, I only got to click one move with that Pokemon that didn't connect into a Protect, and it didn't crit. I think it was like a 50% because a high crit rate move with Scope Lens kind of sucked. I would have liked to have crit, but I won the series anyways, so I guess I can't complain that much. Mental Herb, my opponent never taunted the Pokemon. Generally, I think better on Trick Room setters and on like Eviolite, sort of. Not Eviolite, but like slower mons that you're really expecting to get a thing. Or if you have like Klefki and your opponent has Taunt, they're going to taunt your Klefki, so you can run a Mental Herb and the Thunderwave them. Air Balloon, Iron Shreds was awful that game, so I didn't get to click Earthquake. Flame Plate and Eject, actually all three of these are Salazzle. I only clicked Poison Move and Fake Out, so Flame Plate never went off. I never had like a good position to. I think I did click like Enter in that move, but it never successfully went off because the Salazzle fainted. On the one turn I did click a Fire move, but Salazzle's often really liking to click Fake Out and Sludge Bomb. I think I was in a better position if I'd run Protect over Fire Lash, despite how cool Fire Lash was as a tech. And then a Jetpack. I mean, my opponent didn't bring Intimidate, so I didn't get switched by Intimidate, and I didn't manage to click Overheat in any position, so I didn't get switched by my Overheat. Your opponent can really, like both of these were, I did not get to click Overheat items, and that really comes down to what my opponent's positioning is. And having dual stab and only being able to boost one of them is not as good as being able to boost both. When I had Latios in the Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl format, I ran Soldew, which boosts both your Psychic and Dragon Stab moves, and that is an incredibly strong item. Obviously, when you're not playing against Grimmsnarl, which you're not in BDSP, but being able to click both stabs and get value is good. Like, it's like a Life Orb that is weaker but doesn't come with recoil. Only having it on one stab is not as good, though obviously I did get use out of Insect Plate, Spooky Plate, Shadow Plate, and Fist Plate. Not Shadow Plate, sorry, Stone Plate and Fist Plate. It was just that the fire was not as consistent a stab as Bug. Huh, that's a weird one to say. No, Bug is a good stab, as I've said. And these items, the plates go incredibly well if you already have a boosting ability, and less well without that, which is why it wasn't as good on Decidueye as it was on Cleavor, and Cleavor is just a very good Pokemon. So, ultimately, how important is playing well and running the best item to winning games? I think that if you have bad items or less premium items, it becomes very difficult to play sort of a defensive game plan. So we go to the first couple of weeks. I had done a lot okay, I want to have the Citrus Berry here, and then try and set up, Ipuff Berry here, try and set up Tailwind, and then get multiple turns off, use Fake Out, and then Encore their Pokemon, and use Overheat as a pivot move. and then I'd like to get a Swords Dance off with Decidueye, and I'd like to stockpile up with Gastrodon, and none of that stuff really worked. None of that stuff was really like something that was genuinely on the like plate table, whatever the word is. Nothing that was like an actual option for me, but they were just things that I thought could be options. But because I was running something like a Jetpack or like Iron Berry or even Expert Bell over a Life Orb, I was not being able to get as many turns, and I wasn't able to get as much value out of my turns. Also, I Aqua Jetted into my own Gastrodon because I was guaranteed to die with Bruxish, and I couldn't like carry them with Aqua Jet because I had Gastrodon and Bruxish out. A Whale of a Time, week 2. I tried to I ran a super bulky Salazzle, super bulky Enamorus, again with Tailwind, and then this time with Toxic Spikes. I had like a Rindo Berry, I had like the Assault Vest on Cleavor, and I had this Power Herb. I mean, like offensive Terra Blast, I don't know, Acro Flying was okay, but I was never in the position to Acro Flying. I just got Thunder Wave, I just died, and my Pokemon didn't do any damage. Having a Choice Band or something here, having a Life Orb here, and not trying to greet them for later weeks would have been more consistent. And then, yeah, just having more consistent items makes you perform more consistently. I think with different sort of bulkier teams, like Steve, as I mentioned, was doing a similar item challenge, but also a Terra challenge, and the similar item challenge was pretty sort of limiting. So it was less limiting in terms of what sort of team composition Steve could run, because Steve had a just much better team, and I did not mean to, no, it's not that. I did not mean to minimize that. I just found that I was not able to use defensive teams effectively, and generally defensive items were either good on niche Pokemon or were not very good, were low impact. Week 3, I tried to go with some bulkier stuff, again, like this Swords Dance here, the Wisp here, and then like this Taunt Tailwind, and then just damage with my other items, and then they just didn't wind up popping off either. Part of that came down to obviously missing a Stone Axe, was pretty rough. But I feel like an offensive Terra here could have like been more constructive, as it was on my other options as well, and potentially an offensive Terra on Gastro as well. Then we had week 4, where this is just a more offensive thing. It's just about consistency, right? Mirror Herb is not super consistent, but it punishes the main problem Pokemon for Tauros, which was Zapdos Galar. It's faster than it, and then with +2 it can actually KO through it, which was really good. It allowed me to take advantage of Tailwind. Mental Herb meant that they couldn't stop me setting up Tailwind by just having a faster Pokemon taunt me. Glare Amulet meant that Intimidate and other like attack dropping couldn't prevent the Mimikyu from getting damage off with its dual stab. And then just the Sash meant that I was getting often 2 actions off, because the Fake Out is the first action and I take advantage of my high speed, and possibly also Tailwind to get a second action off as a result of the Focus Sash. And the Scope Lens is cool, like it gives Triple Arrows and Leaf Blade a 50% chance to crit, but they didn't crit, so it's a bad item. And then yeah, I just want like stronger stuff, just more like, okay, I don't want you to be able to fake me out, I want to be able to get damage off, or a taunt off if I need to. I want to be able to get more damage off of this. I would like to be able to get more damage off if I need this. I had like the idea of Terra Blast flying, and locking into that if I did bring it, I don't want you to be able to sleep me or do whatever. I'm just going to ignore both your Torkoal and your Lilligant with this Mimikyu, and then use the Fake Out against whichever of them is not Sash, is not Covert Cloak, to get more damage off, and just do damage, and then if you have Trick Room up, I'm going to be moving first anyway. If you don't have Trick Room up, I'm going to be moving first. And if you're trying to slow me down with Intimidate, Cleavor's not going to be affected by it. Salazzle is still Corrosion, actually. But yeah, like just trying to be super consistent in terms of having a game plan that was all doing the same stuff, which I think worked out pretty well. Week 6, again, game plan, just do damage. Let's try and prioritize doing damage. This Assault Vest will wind up being a really just crap brain, because Iron Treads with Bulk just died anyways, because it's just an awful Pokemon that I do not recommend anyone draft. But the Choice Band and the Insect Plate will what won me game 3, and game 1 and 2 were honestly lost to me by having worse items. So having good items meant that I was able to do better things more consistently. Should have been Sash on Iron Treads. The big one, this Citrus Berry activated both games. This Choice Band did so much consistent damage, and this Life Orb was good. The Air Balloon was fine if they brought a different version of their team to what they brought. I think I had Earthquake, and then I dropped it, and maybe I should have dropped Air Balloon at that point, but I was running low on items that were good on Salazzle. I probably still would have appreciated having the ability to Earthquake other teams. But yeah, definitely I think my teams had to become more and more offensive and easier and easier to punish, because I lost a lot of premium items. But it was alright. And then, yeah, quarterfinals, I just had to bring random crap because I didn't have any good items on anything. I couldn't run specs on Salazzle, I couldn't run specs on Jugulus, I couldn't run a Choice Band on Cleavor. It was just really, really hard to find anything that did anything. And it did not wind up doing very much, and I wound up losing quite badly the second that my opponent didn't play super recklessly. I mean, Game 3 was an absolute dumpster. I was just... I think I made like maybe 1 or 2 like bad decisions in what I think was a 12-turn game. And I didn't do anything. I was basically not playing throughout that game. Like, the decisions I made wrong were because my opponent made a defensive play, and I don't disagree with my previous play. Game 2, I made like a really bad turn 1 call, but I think that was about it. It was hard to say though, but yeah. Unfortunately, I didn't wind up playing really bad. Outside of Game 1. There we go, extra belt and Citrus Berry value. Turns out Salazzle sticks on the field a lot longer when your opponent is playing bad than when your opponent is playing well. Yeah, so items that you have control over are more consistent than items your opponent has control over, and sometimes your opponent will not bring things that you're scared about, but hedging for them can still be good. Resist berries I found way worse than Steve did, but I think that's because my team was orienting towards higher tempo, faster games, like for example that 16-turn game in playoffs, where I did have a resist berry, than Steve's games, where it just didn't happen the same way. I don't know. Ultimately, I think that items are cool. I enjoyed building with a restriction, even if the restriction didn't, like, may have made it more challenging. It was really fun, like, coming back, going 4-0 after the 0-3 sort of thing. And Colby's a bully. Thank you everyone for watching. I need to figure out what on earth I'm going to be doing on Mondays in the intervening periods while we wait for VBL to come back. But goodbye.